What are your thoughts about moving on from
Mm.
people who don't reciprocate
Yes.
love?
It requires that we heal the idea that I have to work for it. That scarcity mindset as well, which I know comes from people's loneliness. If they feel like, well, no one else is calling, we're holding on because it's like, well, this is my best option. Well, if you don't have any good options, let's wait for a good option.
Exactly.
Yeah. So freeing ourselves from that fear of loneliness and scarcity that makes us settle even when we are not being cared for.
Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I just had an amazing conversation with a new pal, Dr. Thema Bryant, who wrote a book called, she's written many books, but this book that just dropped 2 days ago, Matters of the Heart, Healing Your Relationship with Yourself and Those You Love. And it was just such a great conversation. I'll tell you a little bit about Thema before you get into the interview. She's a psychologist. She's an author, a professor. She's a sacred artist. She's a minister, leading the way in creating healthy relationships, healing trauma, and overcoming stress and oppression. I follow her on Instagram. That's how I found her. I just find her wisdom to be these bite-sized nuggets of wisdom that just smack you. You're like, oh my God, yes, this is the truth. So when she was talking about announcing the book, which is called Matters of the Heart, that she wrote it for anyone seeking greater fulfillment in their relationships with family, friends, romantic partners, and most importantly, themselves. So in the book itself, she shares case studies, practical activities, personal insights to really help you navigate the complexities of love and healing, no matter where you are right now on that journey. So we talked a little bit about how post-pandemic, there really is like a mental health crisis in this country and a loneliness epidemic. And so I feel like this interview, this conversation is very timely. And I really hope that you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Thema Bryant as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I am so excited to welcome Dr. Thema Bryant to the Terri Cole Show. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation.
Me too. I was just saying at the top with the telling the audience that I think I found you through social media like a gazillion other people.
Yes.
And it really, your way of teaching and sharing and communicating, I find it, and obviously I'm not alone, but very accessible where I'm like, yes, that's it. That's how I feel. So I've done a lot of reposting of your stuff before. And then when we knew you had this new book that just came out, you guys, 2 days ago, I was like, oh my God, because I'm also obsessed with healthy relationships, which is what this whole book is about. So the name of the book is Matters of the Heart, Healing Your Relationship with Yourself and Those You Love.
Yeah.
So do me a favor for those of you who are not familiar with your work. It's very exciting that I get to introduce you. Tell us a little bit, like if you were a Marvel movie character, like what would be your origin story, your backstory? What got you here so committed to helping others have healthy relationships?
Certainly. So I am the daughter of 2 ministers, and so really come from a place of healing and service. And so wanting things to be, as you said, accessible so that it's not just for people who are highly resourced in the academy or kind of the super expensive places of individual psychotherapy, but to be able to bring knowledge to people, information to people, which is why I'm so excited to write, these publicly accessible, affordable resources. Because one of the major things that affects our mental health is our social circle, our relationships. So whether we're talking about family, friends, romantic partners, platonic partners, that can really create a lot of depression or anxiety for us. It can build or break your self-esteem. It can be a protective factor when you're going through difficulties in life. And so one of the main questions I often get asked, categories that I get asked about, is relationships. And I know you, for the same reason, have focused a lot of your work on helping people heal and have empowering, loving connections.
Indeed. Here, here. But right now, like when we think about the now and what perfect time it is for matters of the heart right now, like in our time in history, like let's talk a little bit about societally. What has
Yes.
happened to our connections? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even pre-pandemic, but pandemic absolutely influenced. So from where you sit,
Sure.
where are we at socially?
Yeah. So our Surgeon General, the U.S. Surgeon General, had issued a report about loneliness in America. So even though we have more access to people, we can think with like internet and social media, people can still feel like they're not seen, not heard, not
Mm,
felt, not understood, not appreciated. So the loneliness is a factor. And then another big factor is around divisions, hatred, oppression, on all the different areas of identity. And it doesn't just affect people kind of in their work life, but these ruptures show up in our relationships as well, of people wondering, can I be friends with this person given how they think or how they behave or how they voted? And so we all continue to grapple with, how can I find emotional safety, sanctuary, harbor with other people? But how also can I create that for those that I care about? Which is when we say we can love people, but not know how to do relationships well. So how I treat my children, how I respond to my parents, how can I be a good friend? We're often trained to think about whether or not other people are serving us well. And especially like around the new year, people are like, I'm going to cut people off and I'm going to end things, which sometimes we do need to, but we don't always look at our role or our part. And am I doing my part to create a nourishing environment with the people that I love?
So really, it's an invitation for self-reflection.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
what's my 50%
Right. Right.
of this experience and what I'm creating? You know, one of the things that I know you write about in this book, and I feel like in my therapy practice, because my clients and my practice and a lot of what I write about is codependency and high functioning codependency. So like super capable people. So the irony of that is that the more capable you are, the less codependency looks like codependency, but it's still codependency. So we're still suffering in the same way. We're just doing it looking like we have it all together, even though we actually don't.
That's
So
right.
one of the things you talk about is navigating control issues in relationships. So can you share some thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
It's a beautiful segue to, as you started talking about how we can be very successful. And sometimes when you have succeeded in a lot of areas of your life, the story you can tell yourself is, as long as I do this, this, and this, everything is going to go well. And when you're doing a project on your own or talking about education or some aspects of your job, your independent work ethic is essential. In relationships, you're not the only one that's in it. And so sometimes we take the success strategy that worked in these other areas, and then we try to apply it to the way you raise your children or the way you partner someone. And it doesn't give room for the fact that we're co-creating something, that they have emotions, that they have thoughts, that they have their own style. As you said, your origin story, they have an origin story that's different than your origin story. And sometimes in relationships, it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just different. But we have in our minds, my way of doing it is the right way and it's the only way. And so then we're trying to force that upon other people.
Right. I think that at least with my clients and with myself, because I'm recovering from this affliction, because don't we write about what we need to know about? At least I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much of the time, it's like I feel like, or at least back in the day before I got into recovery, like I was just helping. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just helping, like with quotes on it.
Right.
And it really was revealed to me through my own therapeutic process that, especially with codependency, that it's the foundation of it is just an overt or covert bid to control somebody else's outcome. Like
Yes.
it just is. And
Right.
that doesn't mean you don't care,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, how do we create the space that you were just talking about for our people to be people, to have their origin story, to have their triggers, to have their things? What do you suggest if someone is sort of intolerant of that or the more controlling one in the relationship?
Right. So one of the things I think we need to examine is the way we are choosing people, because sometimes we're choosing people based on potential instead of who they are in the present. And then we're choosing people, I would say, instead of a partner, we're picking a project. So like, as you said, when I get through with you, you're going to be amazing. And
Totally.
so then it's for us to reflect on, what would it be like to be with a peer, right? Because sometimes we want the fixer up because then we feel like, then they'll be loyal because we help them transform their lives. So they're going to be like grateful forever. And so do I, right? What exactly? Create a whole bunch of resentment. And then two, emotionally, what makes it scary for me to be with someone who can meet me where I am, and that they're a whole being and I'm a whole being.
Yes. So it's almost like I could see my client sort of going for the broken winged birds relationship.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I'm going to fix you up.
Right.
And then you won't fly away. But here's the thing. You're probably still going to fly away because your own motives are not right from an open-hearted place necessarily. And I think that what you said about analyzing, understanding who we're choosing.
Right.
And why? Because again, I always think when it comes to love, or at least, being in practice for many years, I know you observed this, that the cracked pot will find that particularly cracked lid that will fit like a hand in glove in a good and a bad way. Right? Like, you're so familiar to me. Like, yes, you're unavailable, just like my father. Wow, this must be love, because this is what was modeled for me. And yet, if we look at Harville Hendrix and Helen's work, it's like, they talk about, you attract someone who's going to reflect your childhood injuries so that you can actually heal. And I feel like without intervention, you're probably just going to be replaying that painful experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, it's when two trauma survivors get together, right? It's the plus of it is you feel understood, right? That there can be so much grace and compassion and understanding that, like, they get me and I don't feel like I'm too much, right? Versus perhaps if I'm drawn to someone that seems like they don't have anything, like no history, no issues, no nothing, then I can feel almost like too exposed or too vulnerable in their dynamic. But I would say the key is going to be, are we locked into each other, not only to each other, but are we locked into our present status, our present identity, or are we continuing to do our work to heal and to grow and to be comfortable with each other thriving? Because in that example you gave before of kind of being the rescuer and then of the bird and them learning to fly, sometimes people don't want you to fly, right? They want you to perpetually be dependent on them because then they feel like enough. And so if people are drawn to you in your broken state, do they really want you to be well? Is something you'll have to determine.
And for sure, some people cannot tolerate it, feels too threatening for you to be well. Although it's so interesting that you bring that up, Thema, because it's like, I've had in my life friends who were like the most unbelievable friends when my life was in the shitter. Do you know what I mean? Like, as long as I was a hot mess,
they're there.
They'd get on a plane. They send me the flowers. And the moment I was starting to heal and get better, that particular friend was really not happy.
No, because they don't know what's their place. you
Yes.
know, and yeah, what do they do with that? What do you need? When people say that, what do you need me for if you're thriving? And it's like, then it's not from a place of neediness. It's a place of choosing, right? That I
Yes.
choose to do life with you or be your friend or be your partner. Not that I can't survive without you, right?
It's so funny. I literally just had this conversation with my husband of 27 years the other day,
Yeah.
where he was just lamenting that I'm a really hard person to buy things for. And he doesn't buy things for me
Yeah.
because for years and years and years, because I don't want things. That's
Right.
it. I don't.
Mhm.
And it's not my love language.
Yeah.
Experiences are, whatever.
Yeah.
And I said to him, babe, but he was saying it sort of like, well, of course, if you want anything, you just go get it yourself. And I was like, yeah, babe, would you rather me be with you because you could buy me a pair of shoes? Like, I was, I was like, I choose you.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I don't need you. I want you. Shouldn't that be, and have for 3 decades? I don't know. I feel like that's probably better than the one who wants you for the shoes.
Yeah, I think it's so true what you're saying. And I think one of the challenges is when the love language we like to receive is not always the love language that registers with our partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was working with a couple and his was like words of affirmation and hers was gifts. So, you know, he would come in at the end of the day and say like, you know, you don't seem like expressive in your happiness to see me. And her response is like, I just got you that watch. Right. It's like two different, you know, and he's like, well, I want
Totally.
you to say it. And so often we have to think about not only like how we would want to receive it, but as you're saying, like naming and identifying and appreciating how that person feels loved. So for you, like you said, the experience is I want to come up with an experience for us and I'll love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he does, and
Yeah.
we do, right? It's
Oh, that's
like
beautiful.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about? I know you write about this in the book about emotional availability or unavailability, because this is a complaint, and I'm not getting into like the sweeping gender stuff, but I've been doing this 27 years. I can say a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just who is attracted to my work. I don't know, but it's the woman feeling like she wants more emotional connection and the men feeling like they want more sexual connection. That was my experience when I was working with couples years ago, where I was trying to get them to sort of meet in the middle. So what do you find can help folks if they're dealing with someone who is emotionally unavailable?
Right. So, I will say around the gender piece, it's socialization. It's the way we're raised. That girls are often like given a kitchen set and dolls, and you're supposed to like make up stories and, talk, and encouraging all this talking. And boys are supposed to like focus on like trucks or construction. And there's not a lot of like dialogue in the play. And now, of course, we have the video games where people make the jokes on social media, how, boys can be playing games with each other online and they're not talking, but they're both on their they're playing together. It's just not a lot of dialogue and being told, that it's not manly or masculine to express, all these feelings. It can really be a setup because that's the messaging we can give. And then in relationship, there can get the feedback of like, how come you don't open up to me? How come you don't talk more? And so there has been like this lifelong message of don't do that. And now we're saying do it. Right. And so sometimes it's just people not knowing how. Like I literally have had men in session who are like, I don't know what they want from me. Or like, what is that? Or how do I do that? I would say in part leaning into and learning to express, and which starts with like your own self-awareness, because I can't share what I'm feeling if I haven't been thinking about my feelings or I'm not tuned into it. And then on the other side of that, I would also say, whether it's men or women, if they're less communicative verbally, what are the signs? What are the ways that you know that this person cares for you? So we can work on, the language and communication, but let's also be open to the various ways people express their care. And, along the lines of the sexual intimacy, if women are given this message of, that it's for the pleasure of someone else, like, and not their own pleasure or connected to themselves. That also becomes challenging of like, if it's obligation or duty or, there's an interesting correlation, which of course makes sense. Sexual satisfaction is connected to sex drive. So if it's not satisfying for me, why would I want to keep doing it? Right?
Right.
Right. So if people are having sexual intimacy and there's no pleasuring of one of the partners, then, of course, there can be other factors, biological and that kind of thing. But a piece of it can be satisfaction and pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I think that reconnecting with the communication or connecting for the first time for people who are sort of disconnected,
Right.
it's figuring out yourself. And I feel like there's got to be some kind of a willingness on both people's parts. It doesn't even have to be that deep. Like, I don't look at, being in a long-term relationship. I don't look at my husband. He doesn't have the needs that I have, but if we can talk and he knows what his feelings are. And I think that even though he would act them out more than he would talk them out if I let him.
Yeah.
I'm like, you seem like something's wrong. Is there you want to talk about something? And he knows there's only so long I'm going to let him. And even he's not mad at me.
Yeah.
But it's like instead of sharing the feeling, it's more natural for him to just be in a bad mood and kind of walk around that way for a day or two, and I've got some tolerance, not a lot though. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. You're poisoning my air. So if you want to be in a bad mood, you can stay in your studio. That's great. But you figure it out.
Yeah.
When you don't leave, like when somebody doesn't leave, right? You're both committed to doing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, as you're describing, learning each other, right? It's like, how can I tell that they're bothered or offended or irritated? And I appreciate your point of like, sometimes you just give space for that. And then sometimes it's like, okay, like we really need to have a conversation because it's not shifting. Yes.
Right. Exactly. So what do you think about, I had a client years ago who would stay in relationships with people that I didn't even think they were actually relationships, right? They had an experience. They were relationships, but it was like months would go by in between. But the person occupied her mind all the time. It's like, you could call it, there's that limerick that they talk about. There's all different things. But what are your thoughts about moving on from people who don't reciprocate love?
Yeah. So it requires that we heal the idea that I have to work for it. And sometimes that template or that schema, that thought comes from, if growing up, I had a parent who was emotionally unavailable or who abandoned me, or just was not affectionate. So I felt like I had to either be perfect or get good grades or do these things in order to get any attention or praise. So then we can hold on to hope when people talk about the breadcrumbing, right? They give you just a little bit of affirmation, or just when you're about to give up, they call or text you. And now you're like looped all the way back in. I remember working with a client, and when we started, I feel like this guy had like stood her up like 4 times. And then he was about to ask her out again. I'm like, wait. Are you about to say yes again? So, sometimes either feeling like I have to earn it, or that scarcity mindset as well, which I know comes from people's loneliness. If they feel like, well, no one else is calling. So then, one of the things I tell people I had to discover kind of earlier in life, was I was probably a teenager. There were 3 guys who liked me. They were all really not good for me, but I picked the best of the 3. And so my point is to tell people sometimes it's none of the above, right? Because like we're holding on because it's like, well, this is my best option. Well, if you don't have any good options, let's wait for a good option.
Exactly.
Yeah. So freeing ourselves from that fear of loneliness and scarcity that makes us settle even when we are not being cared for.
Yes. And I also feel like sometimes with the client I was thinking about, it was easier for her to be in a fantasy relationship. And the word I was thinking of is limerence, not limerick, which is like a weird poem. Anyway, do you know what I mean? Where sometimes there's something about intimacy that's so threatening that it's almost like,
yes,
I'm dating this person, but then she'd eventually get to points of being very unsatisfied, right? Because
right.
A like fantasy relationship is only going to ever be so satisfying, you know?
Absolutely. That's why I say sometimes we're drawn to emotionally unavailable people because we ourselves are emotionally unavailable. So it keeps it safe. It's like if someone is really going to show up for you and be into you, that can be intense, right? That can feel overwhelming if someone is really paying attention. And so now instead, you find yourself as the side person for a decade and, being frustrated that they won't leave their family, but yet continuing to participate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, like you said before, the scarcity mindset, the fear
Yeah.
that sort of, this is the best I can do,
Right.
or this is only for now, even having clients, sort of justify these non-reciprocal relationships and saying, this is just for now. This is not anything serious, but a just for now can last for many, many years. And I'd always be like, your youth and your beauty, babe, like, let's not waste it on this just for now guy or person that it's not sort of moving into,
So it's, unfulfilling and healing our own esteem to know that, because sometimes we see like these kind of lovey-dovey relationships and it's like, that's for other people, or that's for like certain people who have either money or look a certain way. And so to actually believe that I'm worthy and deserving of that, and also recognizing the harm and distress it causes to continue to pursue people who are not invested in you, so to be freed from that so you can actually be available for people who will align and appreciate you.
Yes. If you guys are just joining, the book is Matters of the Heart, Healing Your Relationship with Yourself and Those You Love. Why now for this book?
Yeah, it is so important to me as we look at the number of people who are saying they desire deeper intimacy or relationships. So either they're single and dissatisfied, or they can be married and coupled and dissatisfied. So looking at ways we can enhance those relationships, but not only in the realm of romance, but I also talk about it for family and friendship. And recognizing that healthy relationships protect us mentally, spiritually, even in terms of our physical health. I think that it's so vital. My book before this was Homecoming, Overcome Stress and Trauma. So I do think it is important to do a level or an aspect of our work internally or individually. But then a big part of us creating like these healthy lives of thriving is also having healthy connections. So I feel like it's kind of the natural progression from us healing our stress and trauma and now wanting to, in a better way, show up in my relationships.
Yes. And you feel like, well, I'll ask you, do you feel like if people really want to change this in their lives, if they're willing to do the work, if they read your book, if they follow you, if they do all the self-reflection, do you think that this is possible for everyone?
I do believe it's possible. I think that one of the things we want to watch is sometimes, whether in friendship or romance, everybody wants the same small group of people, right? So it's like, oh, I want the popular one to be my best friend. Meanwhile, there are other people who are willing to be your friend, but like, are we choosing people who choose us? So like, can everyone get the 5 people that everybody wants? Right? I don't know. So
Right.
we gotta like expand our ideas to actually see what aligns. But I do believe that there is connection for everyone. And I believe so many people actually want it. So it's like, you're not in the minority if you want deeper connection. many people do. It's just a number of things that get in the way.
Absolutely. Okay, I have one last question for you that I ask a lot of guests who come on the Terri Cole Show. Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle, and how have you overcome it, if you have?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'll circle back to my origin story. So growing up, the daughter of two ministers, a big message that kind of comes out of religious spaces is that you're supposed to say yes. Right? If people ask you for something or ask you to do something, that to be a good person is to say yes. And so I really had to learn, I call it the holiness of no. That no is a
Love it.
sacred word, and that it
Love
doesn't
it.
make you a bad person to say no. And so in the pandemic was my first time having to put like a sign on my website that I was at capacity and I wasn't taking any new clients. And at first I felt so bad about that. But then I have so many students and mentees. I started referring people to them.
Yeah.
And it's like to release yourself from the idea that I have to do it all or it won't get done. No, there are many, many gifted, wonderful people who others may not be aware of. And so I can say no.
Oof, I love it. Dr. Thema Bryant, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. You guys, it's Matters of the Heart. You do not want to miss this book. It is out. It is available everywhere, correct? Like you can just buy it anywhere.
Yes. Everywhere. And there's also the audio version. So for people who are like, I'm not into reading, you can listen to the book.
Right on. So where can our audience find you?
My website is drthema.com, DRTHEMA, and that's my handle on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and X. I'd be happy for you to follow me.
Right on. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. You as well.